Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the webinar on Stop Insider Data Loss Before It Starts. Really interesting subject. I hope you'll find this useful. We've just waited a couple of minutes just for a few last minute people to join, so we are going to get started now. So firstly, I'll just do a couple of introductions for those that may or may not know myself. I'm Nathan Charles. I'm the head of sales here at OryxAlign, and I'm joined today by Harpreet from Mimecast, senior sales engineer. Harpreet, nice to see you this morning. How are you?
See you too, Nathan. Thank you for having me on. Hi, everyone. I'm Harpreet, and I'm the senior sales engineer at Mimecast. Have been with Mimecast for about 5 years and change now. Also worked in organizations like IBM and AWS, so I have a good gauge of sort of the requirements in terms of DLP and the problems we see quite often. Pleasure to meet you all, and we'll dive right into everything to do with Incydr and DLP. So we'll make a start, and I'll run through a couple of slides just to position from, again, my perspective, dealing with customers for the past couple of years, the problems we have come up with and the challenges that we are seeking to solve with a DLP solution. So what you're seeing on the screen is basically how work over the past decade has changed, right? Before we used to have our users work on primarily email, but we're seeing a lot of change where the actual communication is happening, especially in regards to sensitive data. Seeing a lot of communication and data being exchanged on Slack, Zoom, Teams messages, and so on. So what we want to be able to do is, where before the sensitive data and proprietary data was concentrated in more around the email platforms and USB drives, for example, we're seeing a lot more data moving into other platforms that users are using more and more. And that's why there is an increased need to cover those platforms if we are able to say that we're dealing with all of our data movement correctly and covering all of those sending sources. And of course, the data and where that reside has changed, but of course humans haven't. We still face the same issues in regards to how humans actually share data and the limitations around that. And more to that point, the current challenge at the moment is that, as you're reading on there's a couple of the statistics on the screen, 73% of organizations are unclear about the data regulations that apply to them. Furthermore, out of those 73%, 60%, 68% are uncertain about how their organization is actually meeting those regulations in the first place. So as you can see from the top down, there is quite a bit of confusion, really, in terms of, are we complying with the data regulations, and also what actually are they, and do we understand them clearly? And that's leading to quite a few issues downstream for the end user side as well. So because businesses are oftentimes confused about how to comply with regulations or what they are, what we're seeing is, with research that we've done from the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report, we're seeing that 45% of all data leaks are actually completely accidental, where normally we like to consider that when it comes to data leaks and data breaches that happen, somebody wanted to take that data away maliciously, but the actual statistics say something pretty much completely different. Almost half of them are actually completely accidental. So the conversation then becomes, how are we trying to balance the accidental data leaks that happen versus also the malicious ones that happen as well. And there are slightly different ways that we want to tackle those problems. And we'll show you later on in the session how we go ahead and deal with those as well. Now, the traditional approach when it comes to DLP, and this is again 5 years of speaking to customers, has always been a more of a rule-based approach and a positioning of, we know where our data risks are, we know who the targeted employees are, and therefore we don't really need much more than that. And that's where we rely, or we typically see classification labels being used, MIP tags being used, confidential, internal only, etc., all really in a bid to control where data actually moves. However, feedback again from customers has always been that that's actually requiring a lot of admin time, and there is also a question of accuracy as well. If we're relying on end users, for example, to tag each document or each email as a specific category, we are relying on the end users to make a accurate decision, which we've seen that is almost all of the time not the case. The accuracy rates can be a little bit hit and miss, and therefore what we're trying to solve is a new, fresh approach, which will take into account the classification labels that you traditionally may have used, but we also want to combine that with user analytics and user enforcement through behavioral training as well. So all of those things will allow us to make sure that we're not relying on admin heavy rule-based approaches and tackling the data that you already know about, but we actually want to cover off risks that you might not readily know about already. And that's really what Incydr is going to be doing and has been doing for a lot of organizations, is exposing the risks that you actually don't know about as well. Now, what we're also seeing is that the confusion from the top down, the confusion from the users, means that the consequences of getting DLP wrong is huge. Average cost of a data breach is 12.6 million pounds, and that, of course, is a major blow to any business. Now, for a bigger organization, maybe you can absorb that those sort of fines and breaches, but for smaller organizations, maybe a gaming development house, for example, that might be the end of your business, in all fairness. So the consequences are quite big, but also they don't just end at fines and monetary value. There is obviously a conversation to be had around intellectual property being leaked and a loss of competitive intelligence as well. Again, if you're a gaming development house, you're working on a niche game, and you're relying all of your return on investment to come from that, and you've got screenshots maybe from the game environment that's been leaked ahead of time, that will mean that you have then lost your competitive advantage and that sort of element of surprise that organizations typically do want when it comes to those sort of scenarios. And again, going beyond fines, that reputational side of things, the loss of intellectual property and the loss of competitive advantages are all what we've seen before when DLP goes wrong, and there are data breaches that we could have prevented had we had visibility not only on perhaps the email platform, but also source code being shared on GitHub, for example, or GitLab, or files being transferred via FTP servers or command lines. These sort of nifty little ways that data can be exfiltrated is quite key to cover off as well. So hopefully that sets some context, and also, again, some challenges and the consequences that we're seeing with DLP. And now we'll move into how Incydr is focusing on solving that problem. Now, we won't go into too many slides here, just one or two in terms of the architecture. So the way that the Incydr platform works is, again, covering off all of those data sources where data is residing, not just email and not just Dropbox, but indeed everything from SharePoint to GitHub, GitLab, and also covering things like AirDrop, printers, web browser uploads, USB drives, all of these traditional sort of methodologies where data can be exfiltrated that typically don't get covered. We want to be able to look into that. AirDrop, for example, is conventionally one that just doesn't get covered by DLP, but it absolutely does need to, because you can share quite large files very, very quickly. And if we're not tracking for that and monitoring that, then that does mean that, of course, you won't have any visibility and data can be shared. So in terms of the architecture, we've got two different approaches we take in order to get all of that data that's going to be useful for us. The first is via the agent-based installation. And what that will allow us to do is install an agent on Mac, Linux, or Windows, and that will allow us to forward a lot of information into the Incydr cloud for further analysis. That will give us visibility into all of the different platforms and beyond that you're seeing on the left-hand side, and also give us enhanced access into the likes of Terminal Console, for example. So if we've got developers that are executing Git pushes, Git pulls, trying to push source code without using any dashboards or UIs, that's also going to be tracked for as well. And secondly, we've got exfiltration detectors. And simply put, what this means is API connectors into the likes of OneDrive, Box, SharePoint, Salesforce, and also Office 365 or Gmail as well. And what that allows us to do is get additional details around things like permissioning. So who is sharing files to the external world from your organization with the permissioning set to everyone with a link can access this file. Now, of course, when we're sharing something that might be sensitive to anyone outside of our organization externally, we want to be able to make sure that the permissioning is set as such where only that person that is receiving the file should be able to access the file. But what we're seeing in organization is that isn't the case due to relaxed policies and a lack of user engagement with or user awareness in regards to what they should and shouldn't be sharing. We're seeing a lot of files being shared with permissioning set to everyone with the link can access that file, which of course is very problematic because an external third party can share those files freely and forward them on, and everyone can access those files as well. So getting that information, getting access to your email flow, for example, is going to be really helpful in getting additional information. And we'll see how all of this ties in when we have a look at the dashboard. Now, one of the other things that's also that allows us, the API connections allow us to do, it also cover devices that may not have an agent installed as well. And this means that if we've got to bring your own devices, for example, users using their own machines to access work and corporate resources, or you may have mobile phones in usage as well, even if they are not enrolled in, as part of your MDM solution and they're not managed, um, when it comes to anyone accessing those files, let's say someone is downloading corporate files from Salesforce, or they are logging into your corporate OneDrive or SharePoint and downloading files and sharing that, or maybe printing that on their own devices. That will also be covered regardless of the agent being installed on their machine or not, because that permissioning will allow us. So in terms of scope, as long as you have the agent installed or you have any user that's trying to access any of your corporate resources via the API connectors, that will also be covered regardless of the actual endpoint device as well. So that allows us to cover a lot of devices, both on your network and also off of your network as well. Now, the next thing I just want to quickly talk about is also the integrations that we have. So I mentioned earlier, we'll also be looking at behavioral analytics side of things, and that's effectively who the user is, which departments they work in, what do they have access to, and so on. A lot of that information can come from your HR solutions, such as Workday, Bamboo HR. It can also come from your identity and access management solutions, such as your Oktas, your Entra IDs of the world, Azure AD, and that will allow us to pull in a lot of information about the user themselves. That is going to be really helpful in figuring out, for example, when users are have handed in a notice and they're set to depart from the organization. All of these things are quite important because they increase the risk that someone or a particular user is going to be likely to take away some information that they shouldn't. So we're going to be automatically working with that. Again, the emphasis here is that the administrator time required is very, very low because we're going to be working on a lot of automation. So you don't have to define who the departing employees are. We can already figure those details out from the solutions that you have. And finally, we've got outbound integrations into your SIEM solutions, your source solutions. This could be to share a lot of information that we're going to be looking at for retention, investigation, but also to carry out what we call insider workflows. This is where we're able to take the data that's showing us the risk on the platform, and then we can use third-party sources or tools you already have, such as CrowdStrike, Splunk, Rapid7, and what we can do is carry out actions on those platforms. So if we do see a malicious exfiltration happening and you want to be able to disconnect that user's device in CrowdStrike, you absolutely can do right from within the platform itself. So it really depends on the approach that we want to take and actually see what's happening. Is it malicious? Is it not? Is it a critical event? And that will allow us to see how we're going to be dealing with that particular exfiltration event as well. And also in terms of utilizing Incydr for some of our API partners, a lot of our API partners are not just partners, but they're also our customers as well. The likes of CrowdStrike, Splunk, for example, Lyft, are all our customers that also make use of Incydr as part of their own data leak prevention and insider risk strategies as well. So we've got that confidence from organizations that they use Incydr, and it works very, very well. So I hope that was helpful in terms of an overview for the Incydr platform. And what we will just do next is go into the platform itself to show you a little bit more detail how everything works together and actually fits in. So what we're looking at is the Incydr dashboard. Now, there is going to be a lot of information here, and it's all designed to expose the risks in your organization. But what I'm going to do is to make it simpler, I will go through a couple of use cases. And the first use case, and I think this is very prominent for especially the past 2 years, we've been having conversation with customers, is around the uses of Gen AI tools. We're seeing them, plastered all over TikTok, even Instagram Reels, prompts being handed out to users saying, here's how to make your emails better, or reformat even a LinkedIn post, or whatever it might be. But a lot of the times what those reels and the social media is not mentioning is how that data is used and what you should and shouldn't be sharing on those tools. So what this allows us to do is, if we go into, for example, the exfiltration dashboard, we can easily filter. Typically, we're seeing the source and the destination. So these are where data is coming from and also where it's going to as well. But as an organization, let's say you're particularly interested, in the AI usage in your organization. That's where we can go ahead and actually say that we want to know about all of the data that's being shared from everywhere, from the source side. But the destination side, we might want to look at ChatGPT, Black Box AI, DeepSeek, Cloud, and so on. And that will allow us to build a clearer picture as to the usage of AI tools in your organization. So as we can see where the files are being picked up from and where the data is coming from. So we can see files are being acquired from Dropbox, from Box. We've even got integration into AWS, so we can see when S3 buckets and the data within them are also being uploaded and shared. Salesforce reporting, so corporate Salesforce reports are downloaded from Salesforce and being shared as well. In this case, we can see that we've got 5 reports going into DeepSeek. And you can always investigate this in a little bit more detail, and we'll go through that as well. But at a high level, what do organizations want to know under this circumstance? Well, it's normally what the AI tools are that are under use. It's also what is the information that's being shared within those AI tools, and also maybe who is actually using those unapproved tools. And these are all dashboards that are out of the box, but you can also create custom ones as well. So if you have a look at the risk scenarios, we'll stick to AI for now, but as you can see, there are many other out of the box dashboards that can be used to highlight risk. The first thing we'll do is have a look at AI tools, and that's going to tell you which AI tools are under use as a pie chart, and also show you who are the users that are exfiltrating data. This can work in line with your internal regulations or user acceptance policy you may have. You might, for example, say that all users can use ChatGPT, but they cannot use DeepSeek. And this will allow you to figure out which users are adhering to those policies, and also any other maybe more niche AI tools that may be under usage that you might also want to consider as well. If we go back into risk scenarios, once we know which AI tools are under use, we can also have a look at what kind of files are being shared and uploaded to those AI tools as well. And in this case, we can see a wide variety of zip files, spreadsheets being shared, documents, images, presentations, and even source code as well. All of this information is, of course, going to be very helpful for us. And then once we figured out which AI tools, what is being shared, we can also, of course, have a look at who the individuals are that are sharing that information. And this is sort of the higher level, what AI tools are under usage, who's using them, and also what's being shared. And that's going to expose a lot of information in regards to the changes that an organization may need to make internally as well. What we can also do is explore everything in a little bit more detail. So if we open up a forensic search, for example, you'll see a lot of operators, but we can see that those those data points that we were looking at are filled up of events. And these events will allow us to figure out who's uploading data to AI tools, what those files actually are. In this case, we've got JavaScript files being shared, Excel files, PDFs, etc., etc. And that can be explored in more detail as well. So that's the AI use case that's being covered there in quite a lot of detail. And again, this dashboard can be used to figure out more nuanced destinations as well. So for example, if you've got, if we head over to the destination risk indicator activity, we can also see that Telegram is being used and there are 12 events under that particular destination. This may or may not be approved, but again, it's giving you visibility into the usage of secure FTP servers, SAP servers, Amazon S3 buckets, printers, iMessage, iCloud, AirDrop. All of these destinations are being covered where typically you didn't have the visibility into that. Now, in a lot of cases, when we speak to customers, DLP sometimes has become synonymous with tagging and classification. So when we go into the risk settings, we can explore a lot of different variables that we are tracking for. And one of those variables is in fact the classification and sensitivity labels. Now, what that allows us to do is automatically ingest any tagging that may already be going on in your organization. And this oftentimes is the case. We speak to customers and sometimes they do say, hey Harpreet, we've spent the past 2 years on a in-depth tagging exercise. Everyone's sort of fed up with it. We want to move past that. We don't have the time to keep spending it, and also it doesn't actually work properly for us. There are a lot of gaps. Data that should be tagged sometimes isn't tagged, data that shouldn't be tagged is tagged, and data that is tagged sometimes is tagged with the wrong tags. A lot of confusion going on even as I'm saying that, but the point is we want to be able to clarify that. So what we'll do is automatically ingest those confidential labels, those internal only restricted labels for you. And as you can see, they are going to add a certain element of risk above and beyond everything else that we're tracking for. But we don't want this to be the only indicator because it's a little bit black and white, and also the accuracy piece. What we want to do instead is also, as well as the classification sensitivity labels, we want to be able to look at what's actually contained in those files. Are they NHS numbers? Are they UK passport numbers? Are there bank account numbers in those files, in those screenshots, in those images? We also want to be able to look at where those files are coming from. And you don't have to define any of this. So for example, there are no policies you have to create for us to track AI tools. We automatically track more than 50 AI tools out of the box. And you can modify how important each tool is. So if, for example, you want to say that ChatGPT is corporate approved and therefore it shouldn't add any risk to a given event. But actually, when it comes to, let's say, DeepSeek, I want to increase the level of risk to that. Now, what would happen there is that any documents that are being shared from and to DeepSeek is going to apply a risk score, which will be added to the overall risk score. We also will take into account user behavior. Now, typically, this is for use cases, for example, where you've got one user that shares a file across to, let's say, OneDrive, and you've got another user the very next day who does the same thing. That second user, however, might receive a higher risk rating. The reason being is they maybe haven't used that destination ever while they've been working at the organization. And typically when users are maliciously trying to take away files, they might not use popular tools, popular file sharing tools such as OneDrive. They might use a very obscure one that nobody's really ever heard of before. And we will detect for that. We want to be able to say that actually that the second user typically doesn't use File.io, for example, so they use that for the very first time. Again, odd behavior. They use their own personal account to do that. Again, risky behavior being added on top. And also maybe they rename the file as well. You might have a sensitive PDF file that's been downloaded from your corporate OneDrive, and that PDF file has been renamed as a JPEG, for example. So you've got PDFs masquerading as JPEG files, all in a bid to evade detection. Now, if we didn't track for any of this, we're again just relying on classification labels. Does it say internal only? Does it say restricted? And that's as far as that's going to go. But when a malicious event is happening, users are not going to tag that data as such, because they're trying to take that away in the first place. So we need an automated way of looking into all of that. So as you can see, we've got inbuilt library of all the different platforms that we are tracking for. No policies are required out of the box. We give you all of this visibility on day one. As soon as the agent installation is done and you've deployed Incydr, we're going to be getting all of that information back as well. Now, in line with the user behavior side of things, I also wanted to mention watch lists. So this is where that integration into Entra ID, your HR solutions, is going to become really, really handy. Because the reason is we're, again, building that complete picture, who the user is, where they're trying to share to, what the department the user may be, and also things like rare or first use of destinations as well. So when we have a look at watch lists, we will automatically be able to see any contractors that are in your organization. We will see any departing employees. This is all information that we can pull in from Entra to see when the contract end dates are, for example. We can then apply a high level of protection, more restriction, more reporting, and a high level of risk being applied across the board. And we can also allow organizations to create their own groups and lists as well. For example, individuals who are repeat offenders, individuals who are working on critical high visibility projects that require an elevated level of access to different sort of resources in your organization. And of course, a lot of that is going to help us identify the risks ahead of time before it causes us any problems. Brilliant. So that's the risk side of things. And again, as you can see, there are a lot of source risk indicators. We're looking at the names of files. We're looking at the contents within them. You can define if any extensions, if any particular keywords are to your interest specifically, according to you. And we can also, for development organizations, help with identifying when SAML tokens are being shared, when AWS session tokens, secret access keys, ID keys, anything to do with authentication when it comes to those platforms is all going to be covered automatically as well. Again, no policies required at all. All of this visibility will be given to you within the dashboard here. Now, so we'll explore in a little bit more detail what those, for example, classification labels and the actual reporting looks like as well. So this is, for example, where you can go into the file risk indicator activity, and this is going to show you a breakdown of not only where files came from and where they went to in terms of destination, but we also are going to be looking at what those files actually contain as well. It's, of course, a very important part of DLP to figure out what those files actually contain. So you get a breakdown of any documents, images, source code being shared, but also for specific industries as well that we support. You could be, for example, an architectural firm. You could be a healthcare business, for example, that has a lot of MRI scanning files. You may have bioinformatics files, schematics, scripts, diagrams. A lot of these things are something that we're tracking for automatically. It doesn't require categorization. It is out of the box. Now, of course, as an organization, if you don't have any bioinformatic files or you don't have MRI files, it's not going to show up in this dashboard. But if you do, again, no policies required as well. And if we have a look at an example of what an investigation may look like. So let's say you are looking into all of the confidential files that are being shared that have been marked with that confidential label. We can see that 48 events have happened in the past 30 days. And we can now begin to explore that in a little bit more detail. So we can see that we've got a wide variety of severities going on. And this is talking to those risk factors that are all added together. You might have +3 on DeepSeek, you might have +9 on file name changes, for example, or a departing employee gets another 3. And all of those are going to come together to really help any administrator looking at this to figure out what those critical activities are. So if we have a look at this in a little bit more detail, we're looking at all of the data that's being shared with confidential file type classification, and we can see we've got 5 users in total that are sharing those files. Again, beginning to paint that clearer picture, we've got Clarice, for example, who is a new hire, and we can automatically detect that from your HR tools as well. We've got Jennifer Wang. We can see that she is a contract developer in the engineering team, and we can see that she's a contractor. She also belongs to a hire targeted of phishing and malware as defined by the business, and she's also working on a project called Project Tiger, maybe a very highly visible project internally, and therefore containing a lot of granular access to sensitive material. And if we have a look at all of those sending sources, let's say Jennifer Wang, we want to explore in more detail, we can see that she exfiltrated all of these files, a couple of documents that you've got here, and we can see that she's a contractor. Confidential label was applied. This is a sensitive keyword exfiltration, so this was a custom word that we were looking for, and it was shared via removable media as well. And this will all be different depending on how the exfiltration was done. In this case, it was OneDrive upload, etc., etc. Now we can also check this in a little bit more detail. So to give you another example, let's say you want to be able to look at all of the exfiltration happening via AI tools. Head over to the destination, and we can see that career.ai is being used in 4 events there as well. We can see Sean Cassidy is exfiltrating that data, and we can see more details. So this particular image file was acquired from Dropbox. It contains UK passport numbers, US passport numbers, driving license numbers. And if we explore that in a little bit more detail, we can see a lot of data here. But the main thing we're going to be interested in for this demo side of things is that the file was acquired from Dropbox. It will show you the event action, and it will also show you the machine, the IP addresses, the operating environment, and also the executable file that was used. So in this case, Chrome was used to access Dropbox and upload this file to career.ai, and a URL is given here as well. Now, this might be an incident that you want to investigate in a little bit more detail. Now, for example, you can download the JPEG file to your local machine for further investigation, but you're also able to add that to cases that we can work with as well. So if, for example, let's take GitHub source code uploads, and we can see Jennifer again is exfiltrating data, and that's going to GitHub as a destination. We can investigate again in more detail, and we can see this Python file was exfiltrated. We can see where that file came from in terms of the file path. And we can also see which GitHub repository. So this might allow you to then figure out that actually this is our corporate repository. And we are going to be making distinctions between what belongs to your organization and is a trusted source versus what is outside of that. So the difference between a corporate OneDrive tenant and a personal one is something that we will work out the difference and show you. We'll also log those Git events. So this is where the agent is coming in really, really handy, because any Git commands that are executed, for example, we're going to be able to see here as well. We're going to see which GitHub repository it was, the URI, which user it was as well, and also the name and the repository that it was intended to go to as well. So a lot of information. Again, you can add this information. So for example, Jennifer's manager might be really interested in why she is perhaps sharing this Python file that's acquired from their corporate GitHub repository, and she's uploading to a personal one. And that's where cases come in. Cases will allow you to have other members of your organization, maybe managers, maybe the HR team, to build cases that are comprised of those exfiltration. So let's say the manager of Jennifer wants to have a look at all of the exfiltration that's happened, but she shouldn't be able to see all of the data across the organization. You can fill this case with specific events that the internal user can actually access and investigate further, but they won't have access to all of the data that you saw earlier in the dashboard. This can be and has been used in litigation cases, for example, as well. So it really depends how far you want to take it, but all of that functionality is available to you as well. So that covers off quite a few use cases, but also one we mentioned around the publicly sharing of public links. So here, for example, when we've got users who are sharing public links from OneDrive or Google Drive, for example, we're going to be able to figure out who those users are and adjust those settings as well. So in this case, a diagram was shared from .draw.io. And what we're able to do is directly from within the platform view the permissioning information. And this will again connect into the OneDrive tenant, your Google Drive, for example. And this particular one has been moved, but what it will allow you to do is see that the permissioning for the link might have been set to everyone with a link and access. And if you decide that actually that's not a good idea, and this individual, Sean, who's a Java engineer, shouldn't have done that, it allows you to directly from the dashboard revoke those permissioning right from here. And that makes sure that you don't need to go to different platforms. It's all an end-to-end flow to make sure that one, we can recognize when files are being shared via public links, and also being able to actually enforce and revoke access automatically as well. Now, we've had a lot of oversight into the visibility side of things and the risks that may not be apparent to you as you start your journey. But once you have a lot of this data and you are now getting a lot of visibility into where data is being shared, especially those edge cases, which might be those kind of single digit events that are happening, that might be very, very important to look at. What can we actually do? Well, this is where we get the visibility, and then we want to start building alerts, for example, and user education. So, for example, if we have got individuals that are sharing, let's say, files via perplexity.ai, and they are sharing files that may contain PII, for example, we can automatically click on the actions button and send that particular user a wide variety of user education training. This is all an inbuilt library. Excuse me. This is all an inbuilt library that we maintain and update on a regular basis based on common DLP scenarios that come in, whether it's Salesforce data being downloaded to personal devices, iCloud sharing, but also unapproved AI tools is here as well. Now, what that allows us to do is send that user the training, and this can be done via Slack, it can be done via Teams, and of course via email as well. And that will allow us to, and if I just give an example of that unapproved AI tool, this will involve some actors effectively going through and educating your end users regarding why we shouldn't share the data on AI tools, and if we do, then what precautions and considerations should we have in our mind. And it would basically go through the data around how training data can use personal information, and that's why you shouldn't, of course, upload certain information into AI tools. And that can be sent, and we can track for when those individuals have watched the video, etc., etc. So that user behavior side of things is very important to us. If 45% of the data leaks are completely accidental, we want to be able to make sure that we don't go to nuclear options, but we actually educate the end users on how they should be tackling those use cases and sharing that information. And that will allow us to effectively close off that 50%. Now, on the other side, you might be thinking at the moment, well, what do we do about the users that may be exfiltrating data maliciously? They know they shouldn't, but they maybe have handed in the notice and they're going to take some files away. It is very, very typical that actually happens. That's where you can, for example, if anyone has took, let's say, screenshots of a PDF file to evade detection, we're able to read into the file itself, see what data has been shared, but also in terms of the actions we can take. Instead of maybe sending this individual an instructor lesson for user education, we can take advantage of those API connections we have into CrowdStrike, into SentinelOne, into Okta to carry out actions on those platforms. So if we see that this action has happened here, and we can go ahead and disconnect that device from the network, from the NIC in CrowdStrike. or restrict that user's access on USBs in CrowdStrike, or we want to be able to suspend or reduce the user's access to other services via Okta. All of these platforms can be utilized directly from here. We can provide the signal of what the risk is showing us, and then that platform can granularly decide what we should adjust up or down depending on what the risk is showing us. So you've got that blend of more of a nuclear option and also a user awareness option as well. Both really are key. They should work together to reduce the level of risk to your organization and highlight the insider risk as well. Now, one of the other things I also just want to touch on as well is the watch list side of things. Now, we know that some users are at a higher risk of taking data due to the sheer fact of who the user is, where they work, and also what they have access to. And this is where watch lists will allow us to apply granular controls to those individuals. So if we have a look at departing employees, for example, this list is automatically populated in the platform by your HR solution, by Workday, by Bamboo HR, or we can also ingest attributes in Entra ID as well. And what this will allow us to do is populate and let you know of, let's say, 5 users that are set to depart from your organization in the next 30 days. We can then view things like risk reports. This can be shared with individuals, their managers, for example. And what this will show us is not only common risk scenarios that happen for those that are set to depart, but is filled with actual events pertaining to those categories. So we can see removal media usage. We can see Google Drive uploads, for example. Email domains, in this case, for this individual user isn't a risk. We're not seeing any activity there, so no risk found. But removal media is something that maybe we can explore in a little bit more detail. So all of these risk scenarios make it quite easy to figure out where the risk actually lies for those individuals. What this also allows us to do is also add a level of control to our organization. And that's something that we haven't discussed so far because visibility is that important and we want that first. But once you've done that, that's where using the end user agent and also the browser extension that we offer, we can selectively block things like browser uploads to destinations that are untrusted. We can block pasting, we can block certain browsers, we can block private browsing, USBs from mounting, cloud sharing applications, certain applications should not be accessed. All of these things are something that we can do just for these groups of users. These are lists that can be automatically imported as we discussed before, so therefore the access rights will change automatically if someone hands in a notice. Or you can also, of course, create your own watch list as well. And that will allow us to enforce a level of blocking. So I've just got a couple of screenshots here. If they do try to, so let's say I am a developer. Yesterday I could access and upload things to my personal OneDrive. Today I hand in my notice, and this afternoon I go ahead and try to upload anything to there. My blocking and my pasting would be blocked, and I'm not able to upload any files. Now, for there is an option to temporarily allow. So if a reason is given, you can go ahead and enter that reason, and it will temporarily allow you to do that. But you as the administrator can select if you'd like to do that or not. And that allows you to automatically update the protection that you have according to the risk without any manual intervention. This is all automated for you from this side. And the final thing, just conscious of the time as well, that I just want to cover is the alerting side of things. So this is where you might want to say, for example, that we've got the information that we wanted. We're seeing a lot of risk that we didn't even know about. Now I actually want to inform the right people. I want to be notified when certain conditions are being met. And there are out-of-the-box rules that are quite popular in usage, but you can also create your own. So for example, if I take this AI tool usage one, we can see that we've got a lot of settings that we are tracking for. Let's say I wanted to know about any information that's being shared into, if we deselect all of these and we say, I want to know about all of the information that's going into DeepSeek. And all of that information, if it contains, let's say, a restricted label, and then if it also then contains a UK passport number. So you can, as you can see, you can mix and match multiple different variables, and there are a lot of these here that we're tracking for. If any of this is happening, we can carry out some actions. Now, quite a popular one may be that, for example, someone's handed in the notice, they're a departing employee. So what this is telling us is effectively any information that implies corporate data that's been marked as restricted, contains a UK passport number, and it is being uploaded by anyone that's set to depart the organization. I actually want to go ahead and send them a instructor lesson, or maybe you don't want to do that. You actually want to create your own custom message, and this can include a video as well. Or you might want to say, I actually want to send them the message saying, hey, you've handed in their notice, you're within the 30-day period. We don't want you uploading X, Y, and Z UK passport numbers into DeepSeek. And that notification or alert can also trigger a notification to their manager, for example, as well. So it can work to create that workflow depending on the data that you are seeing. So there's a lot of things that you can do here. Again, blocking is also part of this as well. So if you want to block pasting to AI tools, preventative controls can be applied here as well, which refer to the controls that we saw before. And all of that's to say that you can either couple of options that you've got. You can either have all the information available to you and the user effectively doesn't get notified of anything, or you can go ahead and alert the user via a message. You can also alert the user and maybe their manager, or you can send them a training video, or you can go ahead and block their access on other platforms depending on what you're seeing here as well. But again, the first struggle for most businesses is that we actually just don't have this visibility. We don't know where files are being acquired from. We don't know how they're being shared, and we also don't know what those files actually are as well. So that's a overview on the Incydr platform. I do hope that was helpful. There's a lot of nitty-gritty details and so on that we could get into, but I believe that would be a good high-level summary. But yeah, I'll hand back to you, Nathan.
Harpreet, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. There is so much data that this can see. It's not frightening, I don't suppose, but it's great to be able to get to that level of detail. And like you say, when people hand in their notice or leave an organization, I know that's definitely an area that we get raised to us is, are they taking anything? Are we confident? Are they sure? And whilst there are traditional DLP procedures you can put in place, this is definitely a solution I can see that is got that piece covered, and you can get a lot more advanced notification on it. So definitely interesting, and I'm sure you could probably talk for hours and hours about different user cases where this could be found. So we'll move into Q&A because cautious of time, like you said earlier, and we've had a few come through. So I'll just put these to you if that's okay. The first one is, how does Incydr handle anomalies related to remote or hybrid workers differently than in-office users?
That's actually a great question. So amongst the multiple variables that we're tracking for, one of the information that can be also ingested, and we do ingest, is if a user is working from remote, for example, or they've got their own devices, or it falls outside of, and you want to monitor maybe certain IP addresses that fall outside of a range. So we're going to be tracking for those devices automatically. As we spoke about earlier as well, those API connections are going to be key in identifying and covering those remote employees as well. Again, differentiator is there's no policy required. I could just literally get my laptop that I bought from Curry's today, log into my corporate OneDrive, take a sensitive file, send it to my Gmail account. Even if there is no endpoint agent installed, it's going to show us that in the dashboard, simply because I tried to access a corporate resource and download files from there.
Brilliant, that's great. And the next one is, are there capabilities for reporting on near misses? So not just confirmed exfiltration.
Yep, that's also a great question. So this is where we're going to be primarily lending ourselves into the critical and the severities of each event, right? So we are going to be analyzing all the critical events. excuse me. But we're also going to be looking at those multiple different variables we're tracking for. Are they remote? Are they a departing employee? Are they downloading from a corporate device? Have they changed the file name? All of these different things is going to put any given event into a low, moderate, high, or critical severity. So all of that is to say that if you're the user of the system, you want, let's say you have 10 minutes and you want to figure out where I should be prioritizing my time, have a look at the critical activity, maybe the top 5 users who are exfiltrating the data, because those are users have those multiple areas coming together to formulate critical events. But again, those edge cases are more likely to be contained within the moderate and maybe the low severities. There's not enough indicators. It may just be a file transfer where the name implies corporate data. Might be useful and maybe worth looking into, but there aren't enough other indicators to holistically say this is definitely something that you should look into.
Great answer, Harpreet. Really good, and it's good to see how easy it is to get to that sort of data. Next one is about licensing for Incydr. Is it user-based, device-based, data volume-based? And I suppose the other bit on that is it a standalone product, or is it part of the Mimecast suite? You have to have all of it.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So a couple of different parts there. I'll take up the first one. So in terms of licensing, it is by effectively users. So users can have multiple devices if they want to. Again, personal devices being used, they could have 1 or they could have 10. We're going to be covering that, and there is no sort of additional charge on how much data we're ingesting. Now, if we started charging by data, that could get very expensive very quickly for this platform, simply because we're tracking a lot of information and we're keeping copies of a lot of data and files themselves that you can download. So that's not something that we are charging on. There are different tiers, and that's mainly based around what integrations or groups of integrations you might want to have, and also things like data retention. Because we're keeping a lot of files that you can download and build cases, for example, we want to be able to say, do you require that data for 30 days? Do you require it for, 60 days, 90 days? You can go ahead and there'll be differentiation in sort of pricing from that side. So because it's really helpful, some organizations say we want the full retention because we want the native ability to download files and store those. But we've also got customers actually say we've got a SIEM solution, we can push all the information there for for the cases where it might be needed in a year's time. So it depends on how you want to go about it. Others really enjoy the native feature set, so they want to keep the data here. And sorry, and the other question was, is it part of a Mimecast suite? So
Yeah, is it standalone or is it part of Mimecast, I suppose?
yeah, no, great question. So Incydr is standalone. It can be purchased separately. Now it does have integration, of course, into the email platform, but that's done via the API connectors. We're not messing with any mail flow. We're not creating MX records. All we're basically saying is, and if we look at the data connections, we are just going to define your tenant. We're going to define some permissioning. Takes about 5 minutes. Approve the permissioning. That allows us to get email data into the platform. But there is no rerouting that's required. You could be on a different platform email-wise, or just be in Office 365 vanilla, and it will still work without any issues.
Brilliant. And yeah, cautious time, but we've got one more question, hopefully to squeeze in. How does Incydr scale with rapid workforce growth or M&A activity?
Yep, no, that's also a great question. So typically that's where you have granular controls in regards to organizations and scoping that you can do, right? So if, for example, let's say you're part of a POV process and you want to scope it to maybe one department to begin with, we can do that. So as you acquire other organizations, you can go ahead and add those domains. And actually, in a lot of cases, it's really helpful when, let's say, organization A, they've really got the DLP figured out. They know where the data movement is. They require a second organization, company B, and their policies may be a lot more relaxed. You want to be able to segregate that data and actually say, how is a new company operating and where the risks may be, because the risk tolerances may be completely different. So it will allow us to ingest that information as well and tell exactly where the differences are.
Brilliant. We've reached the end of the questions, Harpreet. So thank you very much. If you could just hop on to the next slide. Just a couple dates for diaries for everyone watching. We've got another webinar coming up. It's got the wrong date on there, but it's actually next week. Don't know why it's saying 9th of July. It's the 17th of July. It's around Microsoft Teams Voice, so it's about ditching the desk phone, exploring Teams Voice for smarter business communication. And this webinar we're hosting now is following on from our Cyber Business Breakfast. Those are in-person events in London, and the next one of those is going to be on the 25th of September, with more information being shared on both. So yeah, just the webinar is not today. I'm not doing two in one day. It's going to be next week on 17th. And yeah, Harpreet, if you just hop over to the last slide. Just a thank you. First of all, thank you, Harpreet, for hosting this for us and going through in great detail Incydr and what it can do, what we can find out from it. And secondly, to attendees, obviously taking time out of your day. I know what it's like trying to fit things like this in. So thank you very much for attending. We appreciate the time. The webinar will be shared and we'll follow up with everyone individually. So thank you all very much. Harpreet, thanks again.
Thank you, Nathan, and thank you everyone else for attending. Thanks for having me on. Take care.
Great. Thanks, everyone.